Welcome to another episode of the Chronic Comeback podcast. This week, I'm excited to have on the show Dean Winsley. Before we get into the podcast, I'd just like to give you a bit of an introduction to Dean. And Dean was actually referred to me by Tom Squires, who was previously on the show talking about his recovery from Lyme and mold. If you remember, if you listened to that particular podcast, and quite a lot of my podcast guests come through recommendations. And so, if people do have recommendations out there, please do get in contact via Instagram, The Chronic Comeback, or on Facebook. But Dean, like many of the stories we hear on this podcast, was living a normal life. He had his career, he had friends, he had his normal life here in the UK without any real significant issues. And then one day he began developing all kinds of weird and wonderful symptoms, including debilitating fatigue, and got to the point where he wasn't able to actually do his job, wasn't able to work, and was barely even living the life that he had previously been living. It was at that point he decided to take matters into his own hands and began his long search to find the root cause of his issues. Through his investigation and his determination, Dean found that he had extreme electrical sensitivities. So whenever he was on his phone, for example, he would have, for a long period of time, his symptoms would worsen and flare up. And knowing that, Dean was able to make the changes in his life and ultimately make huge improvements in his health that meant that he's been able to return to work and actually get his life back. So he's a true example for me of what's possible if you're prepared to keep going and fighting and believe that you can actually improve your situation, which is what this podcast is all about. So welcome to the show, man. How are you?
I'm good. Hi Phil, thanks for having me on.
No worries.
Hello everyone.
No worries. Cool. Well, let's take it back to the beginning, not to birth, but to just I guess the life you were living before you started to develop those symptoms that I mentioned. And apologies if maybe not all of those details were exactly correct. They were based on our conversation.
Yeah, that is pretty much spot on.
Oh, good.
Much, yeah.
I'm not a good note taker, so cool. Yeah, if you could, just give us that detail from what life was like before, leading into kind of the symptoms, what you went through to kind of improve your situation. If you could just take us through that story, that would be great.
Yeah. So when I was younger, I was fine. I didn't have really many health problems, and I grew up with quite a healthy, normal lifestyle. I was quite sporty at school. I'd play football, cricket, rugby. So I never really, up to the age of 22, I never really had any health problems. I was probably looked at someone that was probably quite fit and healthy, and I'd have a really good social life. I'd be out most weekends with my friends, and I'd play football during the day, then go out at night, and then probably get up and play football again the next day. And then in the summer I'd play cricket. So I was always doing something, and I was always really sociable. And at the time I was, when I left school, I started an apprenticeship to be an electrician. So I was training to be an electrician at the time. And that was probably around when I was about 21, 22. And I started to develop strange problems with my voice. I'd start to get like a hoarse voice, or I'd just lose my voice for no reason. And at that time, I was out drinking quite a bit and socializing, and it seemed to be every time I'd go out with my friends, I'd be the first person to lose my voice, or I'd get a croak in my voice. And they used to joke that I sounded like Phil Mitchell, because where I'm from, Essex, or got that kind of South London accent that had really become really deep. And then it'd get frustrating because towards the end of the night, I couldn't actually speak. I'd completely lose my voice. So when I noticed that every time I'd go out drinking, and then it started to become normal just throughout normal during the day, during the week. I become hoarse, and it got to the point where my throat started to actually physically hurt. I'd get a really sore larynx, and my larynx would flare up, and it got so bad that I practically didn't really want to talk much. So as you can imagine, that played a massive part on my sort of normal everyday life and social life, because I was just keeping myself to myself and not, and for the life of me, I didn't know why I kept having these flare ups. It's basically like if anyone's had laryngitis, it was like that kind of pain that I'd feel, that I wouldn't want to, every time I'd talk or I have a long conversation with someone. So anyway, I endlessly went to NHS doctors and ear, nose and throat specialists, and I used to have these cameras. I'd have to have a camera up my nose, and they'd look right down into my throat. And yeah, so I'd had them so many times that, like, a lot of people that I say that to have your same reaction.
So it can actually go up your nose and down into your throat.
Yeah, they'd give you a spray to numb like the feeling in your nose, and then the camera, they'd have to go up, because they have to use that pathway to get right down, to look into your voice box. But they never really could find any problems. They could see that it was flared up, it was red and sore, but they could never pinpoint what the problem was. And I think they put me on a few anti-acid tablets that didn't really seem to help. They'd thought that had a build up of acid, and I had the acid reflux was making my throat sore. So anyway, I went down the NHS route for a long time, which most people with these sort of problems do. They exhaust all the NHS doctors they can, and you always have to wait. The worst thing was having to wait for that appointment. So I could be months in pain with my throat, and obviously it's affecting my life massively. And then I go to the appointment, which is 15 minutes, and then I'm none the wiser when I leave. So in the end, I started looking on the internet, and I noticed that certain foods would cause the problem to exacerbate, like, so to make it worse. If I'd drink alcohol, which I already knew, it'd make it worse. And then I started to realise wearing certain aftershaves. So if I had worn an aftershave, and then within 10 minutes, my throat symptoms would exacerbate. So I stopped wearing aftershave, and I tried to tweak my diet slightly. And basically I went to the same hospital that Tom went to, one of your previous guests, and that's how we've met, from visits to the hospital. And we've got
that Breakspear,
yeah. And they probably was the first doctors. I remember going there and spilling out all my story and telling my symptoms, and it felt like the first time that someone had actually listened to what I was saying without making judgment before I'd even finished. So obviously a lot of NHS doctors are under pressure to get patients in and out, and I feel like they was always just busy typing something, or wasn't always already thinking of what they're going to give me before I've even finished my story, like my problem.
What age were you? So you were 22 when this started happening. What age were you when you got to Breakspear?
Probably about 23, 24. Okay. Yeah, I can't remember exactly. So I probably spent a year at least trying to go down the NHS route and figure out what was the problem. Yeah. Because at the time I had like my girlfriend then, that was obviously causing problems between us, because I didn't understand what was going on. She didn't understand what was going on. So I'd be with her, and I couldn't have a long conversation with my own, even my family. Like, it was so bad that I'd become sort of mute for a little while. I'd go to work, because at work I'd just go to work, get the jobs I needed to do, go out, and I'd spend the whole day on my own, because it was too painful to talk to people. And I remember I've gone from this bubbly, lively, sporty person who talked to everyone to this sort of I just sort of become really enclosed and and quiet. And I remember people were sort of starting to react different to me, like I was just arrogant or like because my personality changed. And it's so frustrating inside because I couldn't express what was going on. So yeah, what was I up to?
Did you, was it just, and excuse me if I kind of like misread your symptoms when I was talking about, but was it just the throat, that excruciating kind of pain, consistent pain in your throat? Did you have any other symptoms that developed over
Not at the time. It was just purely a throat problem.
Okay.
And then, yeah, going to Breakspear and speaking to one of the doctors there, they said that it's to do with, it could be to do with food allergies or something that I'm eating, or sort of like to do with toxins, like a toxic load. And so I went away, and to be honest, I've been going to Breakspear quite a while now. And the first time I went, they do an immunotherapy vaccination where it's called low dose immunotherapy. So what they do is they give you low doses of a certain, say, a food or a chemical or something that your body's reacting to. And basically what you do is you inject that every day, and it builds up like an immunity to it. And then that helps people's reaction to certain foods or chemicals, like immune reaction, to dampen that their reaction isn't so bad, so their symptoms are not as bad. That makes sense.
Did that help you?
Yeah, that helped. But at the time, I was so desperate to get back to my sort of way of life and my friends, and obviously living. I was only young, that I took the vaccines, and I didn't really look into the root cause of the problem, which later on, as I've researched and gone back to Breakspear, and I've found out that there's a lot more just than taking these vaccines. So anyway, so I went away, probably was at Breakspear for a couple of years after. I just kept going back. You have to go back and get retested in case your vaccinations, like you have endpoints, and sometimes they change, and depends how your body is reacting to them over time. So I was just basically taking the vaccines, and they seemed to help, so I could go back to a little bit of my normal lifestyle. I started playing football again and socializing, and my allergies and everything seemed to get a little bit better. But then I started to develop like chronic fatigue symptoms. I still had the hoarse voice, but it wasn't as bad as it was a few years before. But then the fatigue started kicking in. I'd go to work and then come home, and I'd just be sort of knackered, and I'd have to have an hour's sleep or something. And I had to sort of give up playing football because that was messing with my energy levels as well. That I couldn't really train or do anything as much as I used to. And I noticed that I just thought I wasn't as fit. I thought I was just losing my fitness, but it was strange because there's a difference between tired and then having the chronic fatigue symptoms. Like my friends would say, "Oh, you're just probably just not as fit as you was like a few years ago." But I knew that when I'd say go for a run or play football, the next day you'd get a normal tired, achy pains, but the chronic fatigue was completely like it would wipe me out. Basically, I'd have to just spend the rest of the day in bed. So yeah, it got to a point that it's so bad that basically I had to stop working. That I just didn't have the energy to carry on, and I was getting so stressed at work that because I didn't know what was happening and what was going on. So basically I had to just take a break from work.
How old were you then at that point?
About 26.
So so it's like 4 years into kind of when this first started happening.
Yeah.
So
it's about 26, and I went back to Breakspear because I sort of I've hit a very low point. As soon as I went back, they could tell that the nurses could see that I'd lost weight. My symptoms were getting so bad. My food allergies were getting worse again, but I started to develop different symptoms. So although I still had a slight problem in my voice, I had started to develop stomach problems. And at Breakspear, they carry out quite a lot of tests which I didn't do in the first place because it was quite a big cost. So at the time, I thought the vaccinations would stick me on the path to get better, and then I just stuck with them. But when I went back, I decided to carry out all these tests that they recommended. So it's a mixture of blood tests and urine tests and stool tests. Basically, these show up. You have an organics acid test, which shows up some of your vitamin levels and sort of neurological biomarkers like your like any yeast problems or bacteria problems, and yeah, it shows up quite a lot of information. And then on the stool test, it'll show up if you've got a dysbiosis of your good and your bad bacteria in your stomach. So basically, they found that I had a problem with a parasite, and I had quite significant gut dysbiosis. And they decided to put me on a few some probiotics and some antibiotics to kill off the parasite. It's called Blastius homus.
I've got the same one.
Oh, have you?
Same parasite, yeah. Found it. I think it's quite common.
Yeah.
But for healthy people can live with it quite easily, or just get it quite easily. But people, yeah, with weak immune systems find it difficult to deal with.
Yeah, so they put me on a strong course of antibiotics for the parasite, and I've got a mixture of views on that, whether that was a good or bad idea. Because after I basically took that, I developed significant like gut problems, worse than what it was before. Because obviously I've killed off the parasite. It worked to kill off the parasite, but at the same time it completely wiped out all my good bacteria. It's basically like a big bomb inside your intestines, and just kills off basically a lot of the good stuff as well. And I remember I had some very strange sort of side effects while being on them. They made me quite miserable. I remember I'd take the tablets in the morning, and then within the afternoon I couldn't stand talking to anyone, like any of my family, like at home. Like then I lived at home with my mum, dad, and my sister would come over, and I just seemed like so miserable. And I knew it was something to do with whatever, either it was the toxins or something was affecting the way I was feeling. And then shortly after the antibiotics, I developed really bad depression. And when I went back to Breakspear and told my doctor like how I was feeling, she said this may be a case of because I've got a lower level of good bacteria. A lot of serotonin is made in your gut, and a lot of the serotonin is made by the healthy bacteria that you've got in your gut. So basically, I had a low level of serotonin now that was causing the depression symptoms, and they put me on something called 5-HTP.
5-HTP,
yeah, which was pretty much amazing, really, compared to how I was feeling. So after I started taking it, and eventually I've had to just wean off of that. Not that I'd think it's addictive. It's more that I was so worried to go back to how I was feeling, because I'm quite a positive. I'm always searching for the answer. I don't not just going to settle that, oh, this is my life, I'm just going to have to accept it.
Yeah.
But it gave me an insight to how people maybe feel that are clinically depressed, because the way I was feeling, I just could not bring myself to look to the future and feel positive about my situation. I remember I used to have like conversations with my dad, and I was like, Dad, I've just like lost the motivation to get better. And like I'd go to the supermarket and I'd get emotional for because I remember one particular day I was just in the supermarket and I was just getting emotional for no reason at all, and it just wasn't the way I've used to feeling. Like the whole life I'm always quite positive, and so yeah, by taking the 5-HTP and I think taking some probiotics, that helped build up back my bacteria in my stomach, which helps increase my serotonin levels. Then, so I was back at Breakspear. I was concentrating on my diet. I was doing, because I stick to a pretty strict gluten-free diet. I try to have low sugar diet and basically quite healthy way of living. But I felt like I was doing so much. So I was giving me supplements to take to support my immune system, to support my gut, and there's just something that wasn't right still. I was still feeling tired, still getting quite a lot of symptoms, and it seems like everything I was doing just wasn't helping. And I actually had a long stint at Breakspear where I was on like infusions. They'd give you vitamin infusions, or they do something called cell repair that helps you detox your cells and then sort of replenish them with good healthy fats. And basically I was there for probably about 3 months during the summer period. I'd go sort of 2 or 3 times a week, and I could see that I was improving every time I was there, and I was coming home, I was having more energy, and everything just started to get better for me. And then during that winter time, sort of over Christmas time, I'd stopped going. I'd had a little break, and because it was cold and I was never really going out or doing much, I still wasn't working. I wasn't seeing many of my friends. And then my symptoms just started to flood back. Everything I'd done in the summer was just sort of reversing again. And I was starting to feel fatigued, and I'll sit up. And then I developed really bad chemical sensitivity. And it got to a point where, because I was spending so much time at home, I was using my mobile quite a bit. I was streaming movies and just sitting watching TV quite a bit. And I'd realised that certain people that I'd speak to, certain friends who I'd have a long conversation with, that after the mobile conversation, I'd feel wiped, and I'd have an increase in my symptoms. And before, it'd always have to be associated with food or a chemical or something that I've been exposed to, but I couldn't link it to why it was happening when I was using my phone. And in the past, when I've been to Breakspear, a lot of the patients there are electrically sensitive, and there's a policy at Breakspear that no one's allowed to wear any perfumes or and come in with any kind of smells on their clothing. And another policy was that you've got to keep your phone on airplane mode. So you get a lot of patients that sort of check, is your phone on airplane mode? And I'd always turn my phone off or just leave it or put on airplane mode. But I never really understood why that was a big problem for them. And I started to realise it was a problem for me. So I made some changes with sort of using my phone, and I turned off the Wi-Fi at home, and I used sort of a wired connection, and it did seem to make a slight difference, but it wasn't enough. So I started doing a bit of research, looking into the area where I live, and I was reading up about foam masks and whereabouts they were situated in, like where I was living at the time. I was living at home with my mum and dad, and I found out that basically I lived opposite a bank of foam masks that was on top of a building. So if I looked outside my mum and dad's bedroom, within clear view, there was no houses, no trees, nothing, just in clear view. Within 100 meters, there was probably about 8 foam masts. Probably 4 of them were pointing in my direction, like towards my house. So I looked on the internet and found that you could buy some meters and some equipment to test the levels of radiation that was coming from these masts. So as soon as I got them, went upstairs, I went into my house, turned them on, and the meter that I had straight away is like a sort of a traffic light signal. So it goes from green, which is classed as not too bad, then amber and red. My meter just shot to the red, to the maximum it could possibly give out, like the readings. So basically, like, I was living in like a little microwave. And so obviously that I was a bit shocked with that, and I looked into what the readings meant and how bad it was. And on the website where I bought the meter from, it was basically classed as it was just sort of severe, like a severe level for someone that's electrically sensitive. And probably for most people that probably lived in that area, it's probably not a good place environmentally to live. So so from there, I I found the least levels of radiation that was in my home. I found the room that had the least amount that was on the meter. I thought, well, my dad had a study downstairs, which was quite low compared to the other rooms. Like, my room upstairs was high, my mum and dad's room, and everywhere else basically was quite high. So I decided to move my bed, or just my mattress, and put it downstairs in my dad's study. And at the time, I think one of my vivid memories were, it was my mum's birthday, like within a couple of days of me doing it. And my sister come over, and they knew that I wasn't very well, and I'd spend a lot of time in bed and in my room. But then this time I was in my dad's study. They were like, "What's going on? Why are you here?" And I'm like talking about radiation and the foam masks, and I could just tell that they were thinking, what is going on now? Why he's basically turned crazy? because I couldn't explain it very well. So I'm bombarding them with all this information about foam masks and the radiation. I think it's making me worse, and blah blah blah. And I'm in one room, and they're sort of sitting celebrating my mum and dad's birthday in the front room, and it's basically like the next room, and I'm sitting in this. And can you imagine how they were thinking and how sort of stressed I was, because I'm now thinking of all, like, it's the foam mask that's causing the problems, and I've got to try and explain that to my parents and to my family that this is the problem. Which, to be fair, my family are very supportive. The whole time I've been ill, they've always helped me along the way, and my mum and dad have done everything they can to support me getting better. Like, my mum actually found Breakspear. They've supported me through not working. So, you know what I mean? I've never had that stress of having to convince anyone, like in my family, that the symptoms, because a lot of people with chronic fatigue, electrical sensitivity, chemical sensitivity, any kind of problems that the conventional NHS don't understand, they have a problem with their family basically believing them. And that is a stress on its own, trying to not having your family support you at the same time. So I can't imagine what that's like for anyone that's going through that has to convince people that think it's all in their head. So my sister, she lives in more of a rural area. So where I lived at the time was quite built up, and that you can do a search on, like, there's a certain website you can look and see all the foam masks in the area, and there's loads in sort of just outside London, sort of about half-hour drive from London, sort of a built up area with just so many foam masks. And I'd walk around with my meter, and just, it would never really go down to the levels that I thought was safe for me to be living in. So I went to my sister's house and took my meter with me, and said, "Look, I think I've got a problem with obviously where I'm living at home. I think it's making me ill. Do you mind if I just check?" I had a meter in my hand, and I said, "Do you mind if I just check your home and just see what the level's like here?" She said, "Yeah, like, fine, like, do what you need to do." So I checked in my sister's house, and for the first time, my meter went actually down to nothing, or just basically the green marker, which was sort of basically classed as very low. And I said, "Look, do you mind if I just stay with you for like a couple of weeks, and just to see if it makes a difference in my symptoms?" I said, "I don't know if it's a problem, but I feel like it could be. Like, do you mind if I come and stay with you?" And my sister at the time, she had 2 kids, and her house was like pretty much crazy. Not crazy, but, you know, at the time I was at home on my own with my mum and dad. I had my own sort of space. I could chill out. I could basically do what I wanted in peace. But then at my sister's house, she's got 2 kids at the age of like 2 and 4, and there was always something going on. I didn't have a room. There was nowhere for me to stay. The only place I could actually sleep in was a conservatory. But I was so desperate that I was just going to try it. And my sister was good enough to take me in. And in the end, I ended up staying there for 8 months. Yeah.
Wow.
And within a couple of days, I was basically sleeping so good, because before at my mum and dad's, I couldn't sleep. I'd sleep for an hour and then I'd wake up. I'd feel like wired and on edge all the time. And at my sister's was the first time in a few years that I had a peaceful sleep, that I basically slept like a baby. I felt so energized in the morning. And then within a couple of weeks, I was going for walks. I was just feeling so much better in myself, and I could tell that it was at my sister's house was a better place for me to live at the time. And everyone could see the difference in me within like a month or so, how the change from living at my mum and dad's to living at my sister's, what it has done. And the only thing I'd changed was my environment, because I was still doing the same diet, the same supplements, everything was the same. And actually my sister's environment was slightly more stressful, because I had to get up and clear everything away every day, because I had to use their conservatory. Yeah.
And so that, when was that then that you so at the end of that 8 months, were you kind of feeling pretty much normal, or?
Not really. I was still having, I still had symptoms, I still had problems, but compared to not getting out of bed, not having so many problems with food allergies, and just I had problems with my, like I could never think straight.
Yeah.
So compared to that, to how I felt 8 months later was amazing.
And
I felt.
When was that then? So when was that then that you moved out of your sister's? I remember spending my 30th at my sister's. Okay.
So I must have moved out when I was 31. Basically, my mum and dad moved house because I won't go back. I won't go back to that house. Yeah. So that's another thing that I'm really grateful for, that my mum and dad ended up moving, like basically because of me, because they knew that I couldn't live there, and they knew that I wouldn't go back there. So it was either a case of me finding somewhere to live on my own. But they ended up moving to the same area as my sister. So they moved closer to my sister, which wasn't that far from where I live. It's only like a 20-minute drive. But in terms of the area, it's at sort of the outskirts of it's more of a rural area. So it's less built up, less foam mass, and yeah.
So how have you progressed from that point to now? Like how are you doing these days?
So so in the end, if I cut a few years, I moved in with my mum and dad to a new house, sort of made sure the house was good to move in, and carried on with my diet and everything, all the supplements and the Shakespeare treatment I was taking. And I started to go back to doing a few days a week working. I had my own van, so I could just pick and choose which jobs I could do, in terms of, like, I'm an electrician, so I could just go and maybe put up a few lights or put a few sockets in. And it's quite easy because I'm self-employed, it's quite easy to just pick and choose which days and how much I'd work. And then over the course of the couple of years, that slowly built up into more work, and sort of to the point where now that I'm working full time, pretty much like, at the moment I'm so busy that I'm booked up to like a couple of months in advance, which is like 5 days a week. I've got someone else who's taking on some work for me as well. So I'm like subcontracting my work, and so I've got a lot going on. I've moved out and I moved in with my partner. We're expecting a baby. So like right now, as I am today, I'm very happy. I'm pretty much, I wouldn't say I'm 100%, but I'm pretty much on course to feeling back to how I was before. Like I'll go before the coronavirus and the lockdown started. I was going gym a few times a week, or I still go for runs and stuff, but because my job's quite physical, I don't always feel in the mood to go for a run when I'm running up and down stairs anyway in people's houses, or like rewind someone's house and stuff. So it's quite physical anyway.
Yeah. Wow, that's it's. I mean, when I hear a story like that, it kind of you don't want to get strength from other people's like bad stories, but like because my story's been so long, I was just adding up all that time. Then it's been kind of just I was 22 when it first started happening to me as well. Kind of same as you, never really had any health issues, never really had an injury or anything like that, and yeah, just being in that position is and going, taking it into your 30s is, is quite difficult. But the fact that you've come out the other side and you're expecting your first child, you met your partner. Did you meet your partner before or during?
She was actually a friend of my sister's, so she actually knew me when I was quite ill as well. So I just said hello. Wouldn't really talk much because she was obviously my sister's friend, and I would just say hello. And then we sort of met we not met, but we started talking more a few years later. So yeah, that's it's quite lucky really that she met me while I wasn't well.
Yeah.
Because I had a lot of stress and anxiety about meeting someone that would not have to deal with, but have to accept some of the way, because I still live it's like different to maybe most I don't know, most people that you'd speak to in the street. Like I try to stick to like a certain diet. Like I said, I try to not use too many like perfumes and smells because of chemical sensitivity. You start to realize that how bad a lot of these chemicals are and the products that you use. And I was I had a bit of stress about someone else coming into my life that would just bombard me with all these toxins and like all these stressors again. Like even with my phone and stuff, I only use my phone like to a limited amount. I'm not someone that's always on my phone now because it's like with the chemical sensitivity, you realize that certain stressors are not worth using all the time if they're going to eventually create more symptoms.
Yeah. Cool. So, I mean, just going back into kind of like the darkest times of that period, which I'm sure there was plenty of times where like false dawns where you start to feel better and they were good, but kind of at the darkest times, and what was it that made you kind of push through those and still actually have that belief? Or even did you have that belief, like that deep down belief that you would get better? You mentioned earlier, you've got this positivity where you're always searching. Like, could you just talk us through that mindset a little bit?
Yeah, so I've always had that. I've always had that to keep finding, trying to work out what is the problem. Don't just settle on, like I said before, this is my life. This is basically what I've got to accept for the rest of my life, which it's funny because I'm not like that, but you meet people who are like that and they try to tell you that, and then you think, oh, maybe they're right, and then sort of straight away I'm the sort of person to think, well, no, that's not. You can't just say that. You can't just say, oh, maybe you just have to accept it.
Yeah.
I'll never accept it. Even now, like I'm always looking for something, not so that I'm obsessed, because there's a difference between being obsessed with getting better that it actually hinders your recovery because you're so stressed out about everything, when there's obviously a balance between trying to, because the whole part of getting better is actually trying to relax and calm down your nervous system.
Yeah.
So I've always been sort of positive, and I'd always, if someone gives some advice, I'd always sort of listen, but at the same time, I'm always striving to find the answers. Like when I found that I had electrical sensitivity, because I couldn't use a computer, I got my sister to print out sort of pages and pages on research of the chemical sensitivity, and I'd sit there, because I wasn't at work, I'd sit there for a few hours a day just reading through the research to find out what was actually going on with my body. Yeah.
It's interesting you say that though. Like I've come across a lot of people that say, you've got to, maybe you've just got to accept it. I think there's a difference. There's a different like meaning behind like accepting it, which I've learned. There's one which someone's saying, oh, you should just accept this is your life. This is how it's going to be for the rest of your life, and there's going to be no improvement, and that you just got to deal with it. Or there's a thing of like you've just got to accept. You've got to accept that this is how you feel right now. Like you've got to accept this, because the more you like fight it and reject it in that time, the more kind of anxiety and stuff that I think that's the difference that I'm like trying to strike that balance at the moment, because like I'm like you, I'm like, anytime a doctor has said that to me, my blood boils. And then but like also I do realize that I am constantly trying to like fight it. Like I'm like, get away from me, you're not part of me. Whereas if I accepted it as being more part of me, and like I was more at peace with it right now, that would ironically make recovery quicker. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So if I was like that when I was younger. So when I said I was taking the vaccines and I just wanted to get back to my life, I wanted to go back out with my friends, to basically live my life because I was so young. That's how I felt then, and I was fighting it, and I was so embarrassed about being ill. I was embarrassed to, like, because I used to hate telling people how I feel. Someone said, "How do you feel?" And because when you're chronically ill, you just realize you're the person that's always saying you feel ill.
Yeah.
And then I sort of got to this point where I thought, I don't really care. Like, I don't actually care what anyone thinks anymore. Like, I know I'm a genuine person. I'm a good person. I don't actually have to worry about other people's feelings towards me. And at the same time, I don't have to be around people that are negative towards me. Even people that are ill that are negative towards me. Like people that have got the same problems as me, but they've got this different mindset. So like I've met a lot of people who have got the same problems as me, who have got the same symptoms, but every time I see them, they've got the same mindset. And I've been seeing some of these people for a few years now, and they haven't got any better. Because I personally think it's because of the way they're looking at their problem, the way that it's so, even when I'm in their company, I start to feel a little bit down, or a little bit, whereas I think, no, like I should be the person to lift them up and say, no, like, come on, like this is not it's more than an attitude, not that they have to go and do something. It's more just the positive, just always thinking that it's always going to be better. So like in my life now, I know if something happens, like if I don't know, have a car accident or something happens with my family, like I know now I've got the tools to look at things logically and to not become overwhelmed with a problem. That I can look at a problem and solve it basically, without becoming too stressed out about the problem. Or does that make sense? That
no, it definitely does. I think and as going on to like another question I'll ask you about. I'm just going to quickly just plug my charger in. I'll 1 second. I've been noticing my charger's been going down, and if it cut out, then that would 1 second. Should be fine now. Yeah. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, I guess that's going on to like one of my other questions is like, what for you are the like? There's obviously a lot of difficult times you've had. You've like me. You've I guess when you were young, you lost some of that you would have had previously, but then you would have gone down a different path, and there can be positives and negatives with that. So what are the positives that you take, or do you take? I'm assuming you do, but like, do you take positives from what's happened to you, and what are the amazing things that's happened to you that
I think one of it is I've got a lot of empathy and compassion for people that may be sort of suffering or have got a problem that someone don't understand. The fact that I've sort of I've got, I can't think of how to word it. Yeah, so what was the question again? Sorry.
No, that's good. It's more about like, so you said, so it's more so that what are the positives that you can take from what's happened to you? Like you said, that is, for me, as an example, for me, just like you just said then, compassion. And I'm actually, I wasn't a bad person, and I wasn't, I would like to think I was a good person, but I was also that young lad in his 20s, kind of just living that typical life, like wasn't ever like considering like more of a, maybe more of a spiritual side of life. I wasn't really, I was just very narrow in my thinking, and I wasn't ever really looking outside of like my current situation with my current group of friends. And I also didn't really, my version of health was going and looking good in the gym, like cutting the calories, cutting the fat, so I looked as good as possible. I didn't care like what was going on inside because I was young, and I just didn't care about it. It was now like it's although I'm still kind of a way to go to getting my health back. Once that happens, like that, then it's about like achieving like optimal health, like going beyond like feeling healthy. I want to feel better than everyone on who in inverted commas normal people. So yeah, sorry, I hijacked your answer then, but like, yeah, I guess putting that back on you, what are the things that are positive for you?
So the way my sort of empathy and the way I can see if someone else is having problems, that not to just judge so quickly, and not be so consumed in your own life basically. And I think the way I can deal with situations in the future, that the strength I've got now with what I've been through, that I can think I could put that in with any life situation. And then knowing what I've come out with, like the sort of friends now that have been with me since when I was quite ill, and people that have stuck by me, that I know, like there's certain friends now that are sort of really close to me, and they will be with me sort of for the rest of my life now, because that at that period of time where a lot of people who have got chronic illness, sort of, if it's because mine was spanned across like 10 years, so you can imagine that through that period I've sort of gained and lost quite a few friends, and then along the way I've gained some really good friends through having the same experiences as me, and that I think has helped me along the way, sort of, that I can relate to other people that have got the same sort of problem as me. And at the same time, even by just doing this sort of podcast, I know that I'm helping others, maybe just even talking about my story, that they're not feeling so alone, that they're not the only people that go through these problems.
Definitely. And I guess like sliding doors kind of situation, you never would have, I imagine you might not have like ended up with your partner, you might be about to have your first child, because you wouldn't have been in your sister's place and that kind of, so it's,
and I've had to meet someone that's quite understanding, whereas before, if I'd sort of, maybe I wouldn't have been with the same kind of person, because I would never have known how they would deal with someone in my situation in the future. I mean, Joe, like when you read someone with the vows and they say through health, and Joe, when people get married, and is it through
sickness and health, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And like you'd like to think that the person you end up settling down with would stick by you no matter what happens in your life. But with the person I've met now, that I think that would always happen. And at the same time, I look at my life different in terms of, like you said, when you was younger, you may be looking at going to, like you said, going to the gym, looking good, how many friends you've got, how popular you are, always reflecting on what other people think of you. And obviously maybe like some people work, I see lots of people that work really hard, who sort of, they work so hard that they don't look at anything else in their life, like maybe their family or maybe their health. Whereas now, like, because I've lost my health in the past, and by losing my health, I basically lost everything. Like, I lost my job. At the time I split up with my girlfriend, I had to sell my car, my house, like where I was living. So because I know by losing my health that everything else I love can just be shattered, that now that I look at my health as like number one, it even becomes before like my family. And because basically I know that if I'm not healthy, then none of that matters, because I can't look after my family. I can't go to work. I can't, do you know what I mean? So every day now that I'm always thinking like I have to look after number one first, with it, not like selfishly, but in terms of a health wise. And then after that, obviously you've got your family, because once if you've got your family, you know that there's always someone there to support you. And then after that, things just sort of come naturally. Like obviously you can work and be happy, and so that's how I sort of look at it. And then even all the knowledge I've sort of built up over the years of what sort of my lifestyle should be, and the kind of food that I should eat, and the environment that I should live in, and the kind of people that I should be around. Whereas if I didn't go through all this, that I probably would have, in my 30s or 40s, I probably would have become unhealthy anyway. I might have developed other problems that I would never known that I was going to obviously get to.
Exactly. I definitely would have done. And 100%. I mean, I still I still battle a lot with putting my health first, because I am still like working and stuff like that, and because I am still kind of like trying to like drive myself in those areas, I find myself quite often putting those things like success and stuff above my health. And because there's only so many hours in the day, I don't balance it out enough. And you're so right though. Like, if you're not healthy enough to do all those things, like why, what does it even matter? And more as I've been coming up to the age now where I want to have kids and that side of things. Like, you want to be healthy enough to kind of be running around with kicking a football about, with your kids, whether it's a boy or a girl, or just playing around like a young person, and not be hampered by health issues. So
and that kind of thing helps your recovery. Like when I was living at my sister's, I was still had to spend a lot of time resting and looking after myself. And then because I was in a house with two kids, like I could just, obviously I could spend loads of time with my sister's kids, and I never felt, I remember thinking like everything that I've gone through, just spending this time with my sister and the kids, I felt so happy. It was strange. It's the weirdest thing that you picture all this stuff that needs to go on in your life. You need to have this, you need to have this job, you need to, like, you do all these things, and just the simplest thing, being with my sister and her kids, and even I'm sleeping on the conservatory floor, I was just so happy. Like, it was like, it made me realize that you don't need to have all this stuff going on for you to be happy. Like, even the fact that my health was getting better was just made me feel happy. Do you know what I mean? Just little things that actually, even now, obviously I've moved out, we've got a house, I'm working full time. I still got that feeling, like I know that just maybe going for a walk in the park or just doing something simple, like, could make me feel happy than all this material stuff that's going on elsewhere.
Yeah, so true, man. And one of my final questions would be, like, someone who's listening to this at the moment, who's going through a really dark time, going through, you know, similar periods to what you've been in the past. What would be your advice to them? And I guess, you know, you've met loads of these people, right? You were talking about these people earlier, like when being in Breakspear, speaking to people who maybe aren't in the right mindset. What would be your advice to them?
Um, don't get so bogged down on what's going on in your life at this time. Obviously, sort of set yourself small goals. Try and think of just little improvements, and even if that you've tried a new supplement, you've tried a new, like, I don't know, like breathing technique, or you've tried something. If you've tried it and it's not worked, don't just bog yourself down. Like, keep going, find maybe something else, or tweak it slightly that it might help, or just maybe that at that particular time it's not for you. Like, maybe a certain diet is not right for you. But like for me, like the diet that I'm on now, I probably wouldn't have been on a few years ago. So every time you're always like changing. So basically, if you get a hiccup, like if you fall down the stairs, you don't chuck yourself down the rest of the stairs, do you? You sort of like pick yourself up, and you have to just keep going. So don't get bogged down on either particular I don't know, supplement or regime or something doesn't work. Or even me, don't because of what I've gone through, don't get obsessed with someone else's story. Like, there's always, everyone's different. As a path to someone's health, everyone's different basically.
What diet are you on out of interest at the moment?
I started on like a paleo diet at first, and it is mainly gluten free, and then just
Dairy free.
yeah, dairy free and low in sugar, really.
Yeah.
But because it may seem quite extreme, but because I've been on it for so long, that it's so easy now that it's, I don't know, I just have quite a lot of salads, obviously like quite a bit of veg and meat. And when I say paleo diet, I don't follow the sort of the proper paleo principles. It's just based on kind of fresh food and meat and veg sort of lifestyle, and the healthy fats. Like I have coconut oil, and sort of I have quite a bit of butter and stuff, and I try to limit my use of vegetable oils like sunflower oil and rapeseed oil and any kind of oils like that, or any saturated foods, like, because anything that's got them kind of oils in, they sort of go rancid and create quite a lot of toxins in your body. So you sort of a clean diet.
I think on this Gupta program, which I mentioned a number of times on the podcast, he talks about trying to do the diet you want to do 80%, at least 80%.
Yeah.
And that's something I'd never really kind of
80-20, yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I do basically, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I've heard of 80-20 in loads of different areas of life, but I always just thought, with like diet, you should just do it. You need to try and do it 100% of the time, because, you know, that one, I don't know, chocolate bar or something like that, that's going to set you back. And actually what it does is that mindset is actually like a really bad thing. And what that does is that if you are ever exposed to those, let's say you do have a bit of dairy or something and you haven't had it for ages, then it will really set you off. Whereas if you've just got, the odd bit that comes in every now and then it's not so bad. So yeah, it's interesting that you do that as well.
That's when I basically, my diet is like that, but I do the 80-20, and then for 10 years I didn't even drink any alcohol because I was quite ill. But when I don't want people to think that because I say this diet, it doesn't mean that I religiously stick to it 90%, 80% of the time. Yeah. But for example, last night I sat and had a gluten-free beer and a bag of crisps. So I have got that balance that I'm comfortable with doing that now, because I know that I'm a lot better than I used to be, whereas obviously I couldn't do that years ago. Yeah. So yeah, it's a good point to make, that not to get, and yeah, not to get so stressed out if you can't stick to something that you maybe just need to tweak it. Don't just disregard it. That's how it's too hard. I can't do it. Like,
Yeah.
obviously, yeah, if you've had a biscuit, you've had some chocolate, or I know you've ate a bit too much over Christmas, don't worry.
Yeah.
Just get back on it. And do you know what I mean? Just,
Yeah.
if it's not 100%, if I can't do 100%, I won't do it. Well, even if you do it 40%, 50%, just build yourself up slowly.
Yeah, definitely. Look, man, your story is, I know it's going to resonate with so many people. It resonates with me, even though we've gone through different things, like the mindset and everything that you've had to go through to get to where you are now is just exactly what people need to hear. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. And if people want to reach out to you and just ask some questions, is it best look you up on Facebook, you're on Instagram, or email? Like, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, they can look me up on Facebook.
Yeah.
Just for look through to Dean Winsley. I think there's only one other person called Dean Winsley on Facebook. But if you guys see my picture on there.
Yeah.
I haven't really, to be honest, I've got an Instagram account, but I don't really use it.
Yeah, that's fine. Just a way, if someone wanted to look you up, I'm sure most people would be able to do that.
And if there is anyone who is electrically sensitive, like I'm an electrician and I do help other people who are electrically sensitive. So I carry out surveys and I go to people's houses and I actually help them reduce the EMF environment. So if they could just send me a message on Facebook and I can point them in the right direction.
Yeah.
To book a.
Be really interesting actually if you could send me, and I'll include it in the show notes for this podcast. I actually want to look into it myself. I've never really actually looked into it, but the website you mentioned about looking up about foam masts. And also the meter thing that you bought to actually test your environment. Do you have
I've got one here.
You got it right there. Yeah. Could you send me just a screenshot of the name of it and stuff, just so I can put a link to it so people can see? Is that all right?
Yep. I'll send you all the links.
Awesome. All right, mate. Well, thanks so much for coming on, and let's catch up soon.
Yep, catch up soon. Cheers, Phil.